Welcome back to Wings and Bibles. I'm Dustin, and today we'll be talking about certifications required for your aircraft and the equipment that is required to be in your aircraft depending on the type of operation you're conducting. This video should be paired with a section on maintenance and the required inspections, but if I did that, this video would be way too long. So my plan is to record that video and upload it Monday. Before we start here, I just want to give you a little information on how I create these videos and I determine what FARs I should cover. So in front of me I have the ASA version of the FAR AIM, and in the beginning of the book they had these sections based on what type of rating or certificate you're seeking, and in those sections there's a long list of FARs they recommend that you should study for your certificate or rating. Let's get started here. So first we have civil aircraft certifications required. So these are certifications required for civil aircraft. Except as provided in 91-715, we'll check that out real quick, which is special flight authorizations for foreign civil aircraft. No person may operate a civil aircraft unless it has within it the following: an appropriate and current airworthiness certificate, each U.S. airworthiness certificate used to comply with this paragraph, except a special flight permit, a copy of the applicable operation specifications issued under 21-197C of this chapter, appropriate sections of the air carrier manual required by parts 121 and 135 of this chapter, containing that portion of the operations specifications issued under 21-197C, or an authorization under 91-611. Must have on it the registration number assigned to the aircraft under Part 47 or 48 of this chapter. However, the airworthiness certificate need not have on it an assigned special identification number before 10 days after that number is first affixed to the aircraft. A revised airworthiness certificate having on it an assigned special identification number that has been affixed to an aircraft may only be obtained upon application to the Responsible Flight Standards Office. An effective U.S. registration certificate issued to its owner or for operation within the United States, the second copy of the aircraft registration application as provided for in 4731C, a certificate of aircraft registration as provided in Part 48, or a registration certification issued under the laws of a foreign country. So this section is saying you need an airworthiness certificate and you need a registration certificate. No person may operate a civil aircraft unless the airworthiness certificate required by paragraph A of this section or a special flight authorization issued under 91-715 is displayed at the cabin or cockpit entrance so that it is legible to passengers or crew. So this is saying that airworthiness that you have to have, it also has to be inside the plane, in the cabin or cockpit entrance, so that it is visible to passengers or crew. So it can't be in some type of folder that is not accessible. It has to be displayed in the cockpit or cabin. No person may operate an aircraft with a fuel tank installed within the passenger compartment or a baggage compartment unless the installation was accomplished pursuant to Part 43 of this chapter. Part 43 is maintenance, preventative maintenance, rebuilding, and alteration. And like I said, we'll go over this in the next video on Monday. And a copy of FAA Form 337 authorizing that installation is on board the aircraft. So you also have to have a copy of this form that authorizes the installation of that fuel tank in the passenger compartment. No person may operate a civil airplane, domestic or foreign, into or out of an airport in the United States unless it complies with the fuel venting and exhaust emissions requirements of Part 34 of this chapter. Part 34 is fuel venting and exhaust emission requirements for turbine engine powered airplanes. Next, we have 91205, powered civil aircraft with standard U.S. airworthiness certificates. Instrument and equipment requirements. So now we're getting into the instrument and equipment requirements depending on the type of flight rules you're operating underneath. General. Except as provided in paragraphs C3 and E of this section, no person may operate a powered civil aircraft with a standard U.S. airworthiness certificate in any operation described in paragraphs B through F of this section unless that aircraft contains the instruments and equipment specified in those paragraphs or FAA approved equivalents for that type of operation, and those instruments and items of equipment are in operable condition. So it's saying in the scenarios described in B through F, which are these paragraphs, you have to have the equipment specified in those paragraphs, but they also have to be in operable condition, so they can't be faulty. So paragraph B is just the equipment required for visual flight rules during the day. For a VFR flight during the day, the following instruments and equipment are required. Now you've probably heard the acronym A Tomato Flames. This is where that acronym comes from. So we'll go through the required equipment. So for VFR day, you need an airspeed indicator, an altimeter, magnetic direction indicator, a tachometer for each engine, oil pressure gauge for each engine using pressure system, temperature gauge for each liquid-cooled engine, oil temperature gauge for each air-cooled engine, manifold pressure gauge for each altitude engine, fuel gauge indicating the quantity of fuel in each tank, landing gear position indicator if the aircraft has retractable landing gear. For small civil airplanes certificated after March 11, 1996, in accordance with Part 23 of this chapter, an approved aviation red or aviation white anti-collision light system in the event of failure of any light of the anti-collision light system, operation of the aircraft may continue to a location where repairs or replacements can be made. If the aircraft is operated for hire over water and beyond power off gliding distance from shore, approved flotation gear readily available to each occupant, and unless the aircraft is operating under Part 121 of this subchapter, at least one pyrotechnic signaling device, some type of flare, as used in this section. Shore means that area of land adjacent to the water which is above the high water mark and excludes land areas which are intermittently underwater. An approved safety belt with any approved metal-to-metal latching device or other approved restraint system for each occupant 2 years of age or older. For small civil airplanes manufactured after July 18, 1978, an approved shoulder harness or restraint system for each front seat. For small civil airplanes manufactured after December 12, 1986, an approved shoulder harness or restraint system for all seats. Shoulder harnesses installed at flight crew stations must permit the flight crew, when seated and with a safety belt and shoulder harnesses fastened, to perform all functions necessary for flight operations. For purposes of this paragraph, the date of manufacture of an airplane is the date the inspection acceptance records reflect that the airplane is complete and meets the FAA approved type design data, and a front seat is a seat located at a flight crew member station or any seat located alongside such a seat. In addition to those things, you need an emergency locator transmitter if required by 91207. For rotorcraft manufactured after September 16, 1992, a shoulder harness for each seat that meets the requirements of 27.2 or 29.2 of this chapter in effect on September 16, 1991. So these are the equipment requirements for VFR day. Some things I want to point out here that I find interesting. If you've ever been on some type of airline flight, they always say anybody under 2 has to wear a seatbelt, or over 2 has to wear a seatbelt. That's where this is the rule where that comes from. So you have to have some type of restraint system for each occupant 2 years of age or older. Visual flight rules for night. For VFR flight at night, the following instruments and equipment are required. So in addition to the acronym of A tomato flames, you should also know the acronym FLAPS. And this is where the acronym comes from. Instruments and equipment specified in paragraph B. So they're saying, in addition to these things, you also have to have the things we just described of this section. Approved position lights. An approved aviation red or aviation white anti-collision light system on all U.S. registered civil aircraft. Anti-collision light systems initially installed after August 11, 1971 on aircraft for which a type certificate was issued or applied for before August 11, 1971 must at least meet the anti-collision light standards of Part 23, 25, 27, or 29 of this chapter as applicable that were in effect on August 10, 1971, except that the color may be either aviation red or aviation white. In the event of failure of any light of the anti-collision light system, operations with the aircraft may be continued to a stop where repairs or replacements can be made. If the aircraft is operated for hire, one electric landing light, an adequate source of electrical energy for all installed electrical and radio equipment, one spare set of fuses or 3 spare fuses of each kind required that are accessible to the pilot in flight. So I want to point out something that I find really interesting. If you're just flying solo and you're not carrying passengers for conversation or hire, you actually don't need a landing light, which personally I would not go fly if my airplane did not have an operating landing light during night. And that's just scary to me. Moving on to instrument flight rules. For IFR flight, the following instruments and equipment are required. Instruments and equipment specified in paragraph B of this section, and for night flight, instruments and equipment specified in paragraph C of this section. So it's saying if you're flying IFR during the day, you need A tomato flames and these equipment. And if you're flying during night, you need FLAPS, the acronym FLAPS, in addition to these equipment. So the acronym for instrument flight rules is GRAB card. And this is where that acronym comes from. Now I do have to say that it is ordered a little bit different from the acronym, but everything in the acronym is right here. Two-way radio communication and navigation equipment suitable for the route to be flown. Gyroscopic rate of turn indicator, except on the following aircraft. Airplanes with a third altitude instrument system usable through flight altitudes of 360 degrees of pitch and roll and installed in accordance with the instrument requirements prescribed in 21.305. Let's see what's 121.305. In addition to, let's see, on each turbojet powered airplane, on each turbo propeller powered airplane. Yeah, we'll just skip over that. But that is 121.305. and rotorcraft with a third altitude instrument system usable through flight altitudes of plus or minus 80 degrees of pitch and plus or minus 120 degrees of roll, and installed in accordance with 29.1303G of this chapter. In addition to those things, for instrument flight, you need a slip and skid indicator, sensitive altimeter adjustable for barometric pressure, a clock displaying hours, minutes, and seconds with a sweep second pointer or digital presentation, generator or alternator of adequate capacity, gyroscopic pitch and bank indicator, artificial horizon, and a gyroscopic direction indicator, or directional gyro or equivalent. So those are the equipment required for IFR flight. Now we'll move on to other operations. So flight at and above 24,000 feet MSL, flight level 240. If VOR navigation equipment is required under paragraph D2 of this section, no person may operate a U.S. registered civil aircraft within the 50 states and the District of Columbia at or above flight level 240 unless that aircraft is equipped with approved DME or distance measuring equipment or a suitable RNAV system. When the DME or RNAV system required by this paragraph fails, at and above flight level 240, the pilot in command of the aircraft must notify ATC immediately and then may continue operations at and above flight level 240 to the next airport of intended landing where repairs or replacement of the equipment can be made. Next, for Category 2 operations and Category 3 operations, this is IFR as well. The equipment for Category 2 operations are the instruments and equipment specified in paragraph D of this section. Paragraph D, if you don't remember, is for instrument flight rules, and Appendix A to this part. Category 3 operations, the instruments and equipment required for Category 3 operations are specified in paragraph D of this section. So for Category 2, you need grab card, 8 tomato flames and flaps, in addition to Appendix A. And for Category 3, you need grab card, flaps, 8 tomato flames. All those things as well. Night vision goggle operations. For night vision goggle operations, the following instrument and equipment must be installed in the aircraft functioning in a normal manner and approved for use by the FAA. So if you're going to operate with night vision goggles, you have to have these things. Instruments and equipment specified in paragraph B of this section. Instruments and equipment specified in paragraph C of this section. Obviously, if you're going to operate with night vision goggles, you have to have night vision goggles. I find that kind of funny that they have to specify that. Interior and exterior aircraft lighting system required for night vision goggle operations. Two-way radio communication system. Gyroscopic pitch and bank indicator, artificial horizon. Generator or alternator of adequate capacity for the required instruments and equipment, and radar altimeter. Next, we have exclusions. Paragraph F and G of this section do not apply to operations conducted by a holder of a certificate issued under Part 121 or Part 135 of this chapter. This next section that I will be covering is the specifics for the equipment that was just described in the last section. And these are the ones, this is not all of them, but these are the ones that I find applicable. So first we have 91207 emergency locator transmitters, or ELT. Except as provided in paragraphs E and F of this section, no person may operate a U.S. registered civil airplane unless there is attached to the airplane an approved automatic type emergency locator transmitter that is in operable condition for the following operations, except that after June 21st, 1995, an emergency locator transmitter that meets the requirements of TSO C91 may not be used for new installations. So this is saying can't fly an aircraft unless it has an approved automatic type ELT that is in operable condition, and except after June 21st, 1995, an ELT that meets the requirements of TSO C91, which specifies the abilities of the ELT, it can't be used for new installations after 1995. Those operations governed by the Supplemental Air Carrier and Commercial Operator Rules of Parts 121 and 125. So this section is giving you the scenarios of when you need a ELT. Charter flights governed by the Domestic and Flag Air Carrier Rules of Part 121 of this chapter, and operations governed by Part 135 of this chapter. Or, for operations other than those specified in paragraph A1 of this section, there must be attached to the airplane an approved personal type or an approved automatic type emergency locator transmitter that is in operable condition, except that after June 21st, 1995, an emergency locator transmitter that meets the requirements of TSO C91 may not be used for new installations. Each emergency locator transmitter required by paragraph A of this section must be attached to the airplane in such a manner that the probability of damage to the transmitter in the event of crash impact is minimized. Fixed and deployable automatic type transmitters must be attached to the airplane as far aft as practical. So they're saying it has to be located in a place where damage to it would be minimized in the event of a crash, which is usually as far aft as possible. Next, we're going into the specifics of the ELT, what needs to be replaced, and how to ensure that it's in operable condition. Batteries used in the ELT transmitters required by paragraphs A and B of this section must be replaced or recharged if the batteries are rechargeable. So they have to be replaced when the transmitter has been in use for more than one cumulative hour. So if there's separate instances where that ELT is on and it adds up to one cumulative hour, the battery has to be replaced or recharged. When 50% of their useful life, or for rechargeable batteries, 50% of their useful life or charge has expired as established by the transmitter manufacturer under its approval. So when 50% of that battery is used, it has to be charged or replaced. The new expiration date for replacing or recharging the battery must be legibly marked on the outside of the transmitter and entered in the aircraft maintenance record. Paragraph C2 of this section does not apply to batteries, such as water-activated batteries, that are essentially unaffected during probable storage intervals. Each emergency locator transmitter required by paragraph A of the section must be inspected within 12 calendar months after the last inspection for proper installation, battery corrosion, operation of the controls and crash sensor, and the presence of a sufficient signal radiated from its antenna. So every 12 calendar months, it has to be inspected for these things. Notwithstanding paragraph A of this section, a person may ferry a newly acquired airplane from the place where possession of it was taken to a place where the emergency locator transmitter is to be installed, and ferry an airplane with an inoperative equipment locator transmitter from a place where repairs or replacements cannot be made to a place where they can be made. No person other than required crew members may be carried aboard an airplane being ferried under paragraph E of this section. So this section is saying you can fly that plane if it's to a place. You can fly that plane if it doesn't have an ELT, as long as it's a flight to a place where the installation can occur. And in addition to that, no other people other than the required crew members may be carried aboard that airplane to that location where the repairs or inspections is going to occur. So you can't carry passengers in that scenario. Paragraph A of this section does not apply to Before January 1st, 2004, turbojet powered aircraft, aircraft while engaged in scheduled flights by scheduled air carriers, aircraft while engaged in training operations conducted entirely within a 59-mile radius of the airport from which such local flight operations began, aircraft while engaged in flight operations incident to design and testing, new aircraft while engaged in flight operations incident to their manufacture, preparation, and delivery, aircraft while engaged in flight operations incident to the aerial application of chemicals and other substances for agriculture purposes, aircraft certificated by the administrator for research and development purposes, aircraft while used for showing compliance with regulations, crew training, exhibition, air racing, or market surveys, aircraft equipped to carry not more than one person, an aircraft during any period for which the transmitter has been temporarily removed for inspection, repair, modification, or replacement subject to the following. No person may operate the aircraft unless the aircraft records contain an entry which includes the date of initial removal, the make, model, serial number, and reason for removing the transmitter, and a placard located in view of the pilot to show ELT not installed. No person may operate the aircraft more than 90 days after the ELT is initially removed from the aircraft. And on and after January 1st, 2004, aircraft with a maximum payload capacity of more than 18,000 pounds when used in air transportation. So this section is saying, paragraph A, which is specifying that you need to have an ELT, this section is saying that paragraph A does not apply to these scenarios. So you don't have to have an ELT in these scenarios. Next, we have 91-209, aircraft lights. No person during the period from sunset to sunrise, or in Alaska during the period of a prominent unlighted object cannot be seen from a distance of 3 statute miles, or the sun is more than 6 degrees below the horizon. So, no person during the period of sunset to sunrise may operate an aircraft unless it has lighted position lights. You also can't park or move an aircraft in or in dangerous proximity to a night flight operation area of an airport unless the aircraft is clearly illuminated, has lighted position lights, or is in an area that is marked by obstruction lights. You also can't anchor an aircraft unless the aircraft has lighted anchor lights or is in an area where anchor lights are not required on vessels. So this is talking about seaplanes. You also can't operate an aircraft that is equipped with an anti-collision light system unless it has lighted anti-collision lights. However, the anti-collision lights need not be lighted when the pilot in command determines that, because of operating conditions, it would be in the interest of safety to turn off the lights. So this section is referencing 91.3. You have the authority to deviate from certain regulations if you determine that it is in the interest of safety as pilot in command. Next we have 91-11, supplemental oxygen. No person may operate a civil aircraft of U.S. registry at cabin pressure altitudes above 12,500 feet up to and including 14,000 feet, unless the required minimum flight crew is provided with and uses supplemental oxygen for that part of the flight at those altitudes that is more than 30 minutes duration. So if you're going to fly at any altitude between 12,500 feet up to and including 14,000 feet for longer than 30 minutes, you are required to have supplemental oxygen just for the required minimum flight crew. At cabin pressure altitudes above 14,000 feet, unless the required minimum flight crew is provided with and uses supplemental oxygen during the entire flight time at those altitudes. So if you're going to spend any period of time above 14,000 feet, you have to, the crew has to be provided with and use supplemental oxygen. At cabin pressure altitudes above 15,000 feet, unless each occupant of the aircraft is provided with supplemental oxygen. Now, something I find interesting of this part is from 12,500 feet up to but not including 15,000 feet, passengers aren't required to use supplemental oxygen. It only states that they have to be provided with supplemental oxygen, which I find funny because hypoxia can occur between 12,500 feet and 14,000 feet, and sometimes even lower than that. So that's what I find funny about this regulation here. Pressurized cabin aircraft. No person may operate a civil aircraft of U.S. registry with a pressurized cabin at flight altitudes above flight level 250, which is 25,000 feet, unless at least a 10-minute supply of supplemental oxygen in addition to any oxygen required to satisfy paragraph A of this section is available for each occupant of the aircraft for use in the event that a descent is necessitated by loss of cabin pressurization. And at flight altitudes above flight level 350, which is 35,000 feet, unless one pilot at the controls of the airplane is wearing and using an oxygen mask that is secured and sealed and that either supplies oxygen at all times or automatically supplies oxygen whenever the cabin pressure altitude of the airplane exceeds 14,000 feet, except that the one pilot need not wear and use an oxygen mask while at or below flight level 410, which is 41,000. If there are two pilots at the controls, and each pilot has a quick donning type of oxygen mask that can be placed on the face with one hand from the ready position within 5 seconds, supplying oxygen and properly secured and sealed. Notwithstanding paragraph B1II of this section, if for any reason at any time it is necessary for one pilot to leave the controls of the aircraft when operating at flight altitudes above flight level 350, the remaining pilot at the controls shall put on and use an oxygen mask until the other pilot has returned to the crew member station. So this section here is saying if one of the pilots has to go to the restroom during the flight and you're above flight level 350, the remaining pilot has to wear an oxygen mask. Next we have 91-215, ATC transponder and altitude reporting equipment and use. In all airspace, U.S. registered civil aircraft, for operations not conducted under Part 121 or 135 of this chapter, ATC transponder equipment installed must meet the performance and environmental requirements of any class of TSO C74B, or Mode A, that's what this is called, or any class of TSO C74C, Mode A, with altitude reporting capability, as appropriate, or the appropriate class of TSO C112, Mode S. In all airspace, unless otherwise authorized or directed by ATC, and except as provided in paragraph E1 of the section, no person may operate an aircraft in the airspace described in paragraphs B1 through 5 of the section unless the aircraft is equipped with an operable coded radar beacon transponder, either having Mode A 4096 code capability, replying to Mode A interrogations with the mode specified by ATC, or a Mode C capability, replying to Mode A interrogations with the code specified by ATC and Mode S interrogations in accordance with the applicable provisions specified in TSO C112, and that aircraft is equipped with automatic pressure altitude reporting equipment having a Mode C capability that automatically replies to Mode C interrogations by transmitting pressure altitude information in 100-foot increments. The requirements of this paragraph B apply to. So The requirements in paragraph B apply to these things. Now, this FAR is filled with a bunch of specifications for uh, transponders and altitude reporting equipment. Most of it I don't find necessary, uh, especially if you're just going for a private pilot, because it goes really in depth into the transponders. Um, and I've never been asked most of what's in this on any check ride by any pilot. So that's just something to note here. So all aircraft in Class A, Class Bravo, and Class Charlie space areas, all aircraft in all airspace within 30 nautical miles of an airport listed in Appendix D, Section 1 of this part, from the surface upward to 10,000 feet, notwithstanding paragraph B2 of this section, any aircraft which was not originally certificated with an engine-driven electrical system, or which was not subsequently been certified with such a system installed, balloon or glider may conduct operations in the airspace within 30 nautical miles of an airport listed in Appendix D, Section 1 of this part, provided such operations are conducted outside any Class Alpha, Bravo, or Charlie airspace area, and below the altitude of the ceiling of a Class Bravo or Charlie airspace area designated for an airport, or 10,000 feet MSL, whichever is lower. All aircraft is all airspace above the ceiling and within the lateral boundaries of a Class Bravo or Class Charlie airspace area designated for an airport upward to 10,000 feet MSL, and all aircraft except any aircraft which was not originally certificated with an engine-driven electrical system, or which has not subsequently been certified with such a system installed, balloon or glider, in all airspace of the 48 contiguous states and the District of Columbia at and above 10,000 feet, excluding the airspace at and below 2,000 feet above the surface, and in the airspace from the surface to 10,000 feet MSL within a 10 nautical mile radius of any airport listed in Appendix D, Section 2 of this part, excluding the airspace below 1,200 feet outside the lateral boundaries of the surface area of the airspace designated for that airport. Transponder on operation. Except as provided in paragraph E2 of this section, while in the airspace as specified in paragraph B of this section, or in all controlled airspace, each person operating an aircraft equipped with an operable ATC transponder maintained in accordance with 91.413 shall operate the transponder including Mode C equipment if installed, and shall reply on the appropriate code or as assigned by ATC unless otherwise directed by ATC when transmitting would jeopardize the safe execution of air traffic control functions. ATC authorized deviations. Requests for ATC authorized deviations must be made to the ATC facility having jurisdiction over the concerned airspace within the time period specified as follows. For operation of an aircraft with an operating transponder but without operating automatic pressure altitude reporting equipment having a Mode C capability, the request may be made at any time. For operation of an aircraft with an inoperative transponder to the airport of ultimate destination, including any intermediate stops, or to proceed to a place where suitable repairs can be made, or both, the request may be made at any time. For operation of an aircraft that is not equipped with a transponder, the request must be made at least 1 hour before the proposed operation. Unmanned aircraft. The requirements of paragraph B of the section do not apply to a person operating an unmanned aircraft under this part unless the operation is conducted under a flight plan and the person operating the unmanned aircraft maintains two-way communications with ATC. No person may operate an unmanned aircraft under this part with a transponder on unless the operation is conducted under a flight plan, and the person operating the unmanned aircraft maintains two-way communication with ATC, or the use of a transponder is otherwise authorized by the administrator. Now we have 91225 Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast ADS-B out equipment and use. And once again, this section goes really into depth on the specifications of the ADS-B, and I don't really find it important, especially if you're just going for private pilot. After January 1st, 2020, unless otherwise authorized by ATC, no person may operate an aircraft in Class Alpha airspace unless the aircraft has equipment installed that meets the performance requirements in these things. I won't go into depth on these things and anything following that. And it has to meet the requirements of 91227. 91227 is Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast out equipment performance requirements. So that just goes more into depth on what these performance requirements are. After January 1st, 2020, except as provided in paragraph H2 of this section, or unless otherwise authorized by ATC, no person may operate an aircraft below 18,000 feet MSL and an airspace described in paragraph D of this section, unless the aircraft has equipment installed that meets the performance requirements of these things and meets the requirements of 91227. Operators with equipment installed with an approved deviation under 21.618 of this chapter are also are in compliance with this section. After January 1st, 2020, except as prohibited in paragraph H2 of this section, or unless otherwise authorized by ATC, no person may operate an aircraft in the following airspace unless the aircraft has equipment installed that meets the requirements of paragraph B of this section. Class Bravo and Class Charlie airspace, except as provided in paragraph E of this section, within 30 nautical miles of an airport listed in Appendix D, Section 1 to this part, from the surface upward to 10,000 feet MSL, above the ceiling and within the lateral boundaries of a Class Bravo or Class Charlie airspace area, designated for an airport upward to 10,000 feet MSL, except as provided in paragraph E of this section, Class Echo airspace within the 48 contiguous states and the District of Columbia, at and above 10,000 feet, excluding the airspace at and below 2,500 feet above the surface, and Class Echo airspace at and above 3,000 feet MSL, or the Gulf of Mexico. That should be changed to Gulf of America. Just kidding. All right. From the coastline of the United States out to 12 nautical miles. The requirements of paragraph B of this section do not apply to any aircraft that was not originally certificated with an engine-driven electrical system, or that has not subsequently been certified with such a system installed, including balloons and gliders. These aircraft may conduct operations without ADS-B out in the airspace specified in paragraph D4 of this section. These aircraft may also conduct operations in the airspace specified in paragraph D2 of this section, if those operations are conducted outside any Class Bravo or Class Charlie airspace area and below the altitude of the ceiling of a Class Bravo or Class Charlie airspace area designated for an airport, or 10,000 feet MSL, whichever is lower. Except as prohibited in paragraph H2 of this section, each person operating an aircraft equipped with ADS-B out must operate this equipment in the transmit mode at all times, unless otherwise authorized by the FAA when the aircraft is performing a sensitive government mission for national defense, homeland security, intelligence, or law enforcement purposes, and transmitting would compromise the operations security of the mission or pose a safety risk to the aircraft, crew, or people and property in the air or on the ground, or otherwise directed by ATC when transmitting would jeopardize the safe execution of traffic control functions. Requests for ATC authorized deviations from the requirements of this section must be made to the ATC facility having jurisdiction over the concerned airspace within the time period specified as follows. For operation of an aircraft with an inoperative ADS-B out to the airport of ultimate destination, including any intermediate stops, or to proceed to a place where suitable repairs can be made, or both, the request may be made at any time. For operation of an aircraft that is not equipped with ADS-B out, the request must be made at least 1 hour before the proposed operation. Next, we're going into unmanned aircraft. No person may operate an unmanned aircraft under a flight plan and in two-way radio communications with ATC unless it meets these standards and the equipment meets the requirements of 91227. No person may operate an unmanned aircraft under this part with automatic dependent surveillance broadcast out equipment in transmit mode unless the operation is conducted under a flight plan and the person operating that unmanned aircraft maintains two-way communications with ATC, or the use of ADS-B out is otherwise authorized by the administrator. The standards required in this section are incorporated by reference with the approval of the Director of the Office of the Federal Register under 5 USC 552A and 1 CFR Part 51. This incorporation by reference IBR material is available for inspection at the FAA and the National Archives and Record Administration, NARA. Contact the FAA at this address for information on the availability of this material at NARA. Visit this website or email this email. This material is also available from the following sources in this paragraph. And then it goes really into depth here. We'll skip over that. Moving on to the next one. This is also about ADS-B. This goes really into depth as well, and I don't find it really important. Well, I don't want to say it's not important, but it's not as important as some other FARs. So if you want to check this out, the link will be down in the description. And that's going to do it for this video covering certification requirements for your aircraft and the type of equipment that is required for the type of operation you're conducting. Like I said, this video should be paired with a section on maintenance and required inspections, but the video will be way too long to combine both of them. For this weekend, I'm thinking about playing some type of video game and posting it on YouTube. I can't really decide on what game I want to play. I was thinking about Microsoft Flight Simulator, but I don't think that would be nearly as interesting as me reading through boring FARs, because it would just be me flying from one airport to another and probably just yapping about something that doesn't matter. So I'll probably just play, I don't know, Total War Rome 2 or something like that. Stay tuned for that. You can subscribe and hit that bell icon and you'll be notified when I upload that. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you in the next one. See ya.